about. People often ask me, I get this question a lot. I've got this theme, I really like it a lot, but it doesn't do exactly what I want it to. I want to change, you know, some fonts. I want to change the background on this thing. I want to make this a little smaller, a little taller, whatever. But the customizer has not given me the any way to get there. So how do I make some changes? And actually, there's some kind of simple ways that you can do this with WordPress using CSS, Cascading Style Sheets. And so I'm going to just walk you through kind of what the inspector looks like on a browser, how you can find out what your website looks like, and what CSS is applying to a particular block. So let's start with, let me share my screen. Hold on a sec. And library, make that go away. Okay, hopefully this will load in a sec. So I'm going to start, you know, kind of way back and kind of run through the ramp up to this really quickly so that we're all on the same page. Let's start with what a WordPress theme is. WordPress theme is basically the way that you get your look and feel for a WordPress website. And it's made up of a style sheet and a number of PHP files that tell you how you render various different pieces on a page. So for example, there might be a header PHP file that tells you how to build the header portion of the website, then something for the content area for a post, something that tells you how a sidebar is built, something that tells you how the footer is built. The PHP files we are not going to talk about today. What we're going to talk about is the CSS, and the CSS gives you things like where do the blocks appear on the page, what kind of fonts am I using, what kind of background colors am I using, what kind of colors and styles. That's all about, that's what the CSS is. Now, normally when you install a theme and you're getting ready to get started, the very first thing that you do is you go through the customizer. And I absolutely recommend going through the customizer first before you do anything else, because the customizer has all of the knobs and tools that the theme developer intended to be able for you to be able to do this easily, to do changes and whatnot. So this is going to look different depending on the particular theme that you install. And the premium themes are going to have more options here than the free themes in general. But all of them are going to have a certain number of things that you can do. One of them is the site identity, which just tells you things like what's the name of your website, what's the tagline or description of your website, and that kind of thing. So one of the things on this page, in this list, that's kind of new these days, is the ability to add additional CSS. And that allows you to put styling in the website without having to modify any files at all, because this information is actually going to be stored in the database and applied to your website over the top of the theme's styling information. So let's suppose we wanted to make some changes to this website. We kind of generally like what it looks like. We're wanting to change the headers maybe to be blue or something. This particular theme actually is going to allow us to do something like that, so that's nice. And there it is, and it's blue. But it might be the case that a theme wouldn't necessarily let you do something like that. So let's go back out and kind of take a look at at our website and see what we've got going. Let me mention this about cascading style sheets. So the style sheet part of cascading style sheet tells you the look and feel and the fonts to use, the colors, the backgrounds, and how the page should be broken up. The cascading part of cascading style sheets is what makes it interesting and sometimes difficult to figure out what's going on with your website and how it's being styled. So what I mean by that is I can say in my style sheet, I want all of the text to be black. And then I can say, but the headers I actually want to look a little bit special. So I'd like all of my headers to be blue and then the regular part of the text to be black. But maybe there's a particular kind of post that I've got. So I'm building my blog page and I want a certain type of post to pop. So it's like emergency notifications of some sort. So all the text should be black, but the header should be blue. But in the case of a special post, I want the headers to be red. Can you see this? This is kind of cascading. So we can say all text, then we can say all text except H1s or all headers. And we can then say, okay, I have a particular class of thing that I want to deal with, and that I'm gonna specify as being red. So that's how the cascade works. And when you're trying to figure out if a rule is applying to a particular block on your page, you need to find the most specific rule. So in the case of I want this thing to be red, that's the most specific rule that we're talking about. General text, header text, very specialized text, or text class. So how do we talk about these blocks, or what are these blocks and what am I talking about? You can kind of see that the header is maybe a block, and you can see that the menu is some kind of a block, and each of these individual things, which are actually links on the page and are styled to look the way that they look through CSS, those are individual blocks as well. So you have containers, and then inside the containers you have other blocks. Let's take a look at some of that and see what I am talking about. I'm using Chrome right now, and Chrome has an inspector built in. So does Firefox, and so does Safari, and so does Edge these days. So most of your major browsers are going to have this tool built in. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to dig into what the actual elements are on the page and figure out how they're styled. So if we hit the pointer, and that allows us to select things on the page, we can kind of scroll through the page and we can see what the blocks look like. Each one of these blocks is styled in its own individual way. And if we select one of them, we can see the styling that is applied to that particular block. So at the top of your list is always the individual element. And the individual element is the one thing that you've selected right now. That's the most specific thing on the page. So that's the thing that appears at the top. Then later on, it's saying what other rules are playing into this. Well, this is a really convoluted rule that applies to a whole bunch of different things, but let's kind of break it down just a little bit. It's saying, okay, one of the things I need to mention is a block can be described by its HTML tag, so what kind of a thing it is you're putting on the page. It can have a class specification, which is you just want to tag it and say, I want to be able to find anything that I've tagged with this class. And there can be multiple of those on the page. Or it can have a unique identifier, and that is the ID field. And the way that you specify that is a dot indicates a class, a hashtag indicates an ID, and then the HTML tag is just the HTML tag without any other identifier. So right here, what we're saying is that this particular thing is tagged with, it appears in a single post class. It has a name, an ID of main, and it is a TH element, which is a header element for a table. Okay, so let's see if we can see that. Yeah, it's not the particular one that's applying. Okay, so here's the one that's actually being applied. So each one of these separated by commas is saying, this is a pattern that you could match to apply this rule. So it could be that, it could be that, it could be that. The one that is actually applying to this particular rule right now is this one, which is a different color. It's bolded. I don't know if you guys can see that really well. Yeah. But it's an H1, so yep, that's the HTML. It has a tag, a class of entry title, and yep, it has a class of entry title. And so that is the rule. That's how we found this particular thing. And this is what's being applied to it. And right now, nothing, actually. This is an empty rule at the moment. Why exactly, I'm not quite sure. But we can do something to affect this. And now you can see that this item that we were looking at, we have just changed to be blue. So you might ask the question of what actually am I doing right now? I'm talking to my browser. I'm having a personal conversation with my browser, and I'm saying, I want to look at things on the page. I want to see what would happen if I applied a different kind of CSS, but it has absolutely no effect on the outside world. This is just a local conversation that I'm having with my browser. And the reason why this is kind of fun and useful to do is it gives you a chance to test some things out and see if you like the way that they look. And if you do, then you can save this change. And that's the next thing I'm going to show you how to do. So that's finding something, and we made a change to it, and that's kind of awesome. What other kinds of things could we be looking for and making changes to? Let's suppose we were interested in these pictures. So I have grabbed a picture, and this is, there's a lot of stuff going on here, but the key things that are interesting about it is it's an image. It has a unique identifier. So if I want to talk about just that specific, I'm sorry, my husband is making faces at me. If you want to talk about just this specific picture on the page, it has this unique identifier that you can. It also has a class, which is going to be tagged. All these pictures are going to be tagged with this class, and in particular, the Envira Gallery image. The plugin that I am using to display these images in the sidebar is a thing called Envira. So they have nicely tagged this with a unique name that refers to the plugin. That is a common convention, and it can be really useful. So as you can tell here, this is actually kind of interesting. We've got styling that comes in from the theme, but we've also got styling that comes in from the plugin. That is very typical of WordPress. So sometimes, sometimes you might wonder, I have said that things that are more specific are the ones that are the overriding rule. What if there are two rules that are exactly the same specificity? In that case, it's the last thing that's been seen. And because of the way that WordPress renders a page, it's going to be the theme rules first, and then if you have a plugin on the page, the plugin rules will come in over the top. So that's why plugin CSS might be overriding your theme CSS. And that's a good thing to remember when you're trying to troubleshoot why a thing doesn't do what you want it to. So we've got this guy here, and we have here's just the element itself, the very specific thing, the one thing that we've selected. And there's a bunch of stuff going on here. And one of the things that's interesting down here at the very bottom is we have style equals opacity. Style is the tag for CSS commands that you can put on an individual item. And this plugin has put in style with an opacity of 1. Opacity is how transparent or translucent a thing is. And so you can see if we were to make a change to this to make it half transparent, how it kind of fades out there. Opacity runs from 0 to 1, with 0 being invisible and 1 being completely there. And whoops. And the reason why this isn't terribly interesting right now, or in this particular instance, but it would be interesting if we had a block that was sitting on top of another block. And in fact, that's one of the ways that people do things like have fades that go across an image. I don't know if you've seen, like, people will put headers up, and then the header has kind of almost a dark curtain over the top of it. That's one block sitting on top of another block with an opacity of maybe 0.5 or something like that. That's how that's done. So, okay, so we're looking at this, and what could we add to this that might be interesting? Blocks in CSS have several components of things surrounding them. A block might have content, and that content is going to run right up to the edge of the block. But if you want to have a little bit of spacing between the edge of your block and your content, you'll specify what's called padding. If you have two blocks that are sitting next to one another, you might want some space. Normally, they'll just be abutting one another. You might want some space that's between the two of them, and that's called the margin. And then the actual outline of the block itself is called the border. So we can do something to show you what's going on with the border here. So 1 pixel doesn't show up too well, does it? How about 5 pixels? Okay, here we go. So now you can see what just happened there. And now you can see that this image runs all the way up to the edge of the block that it is inside of. And we've put a border around the outside of it. A more interesting thing to do with this, you can actually change the shape of that border a little bit with a thing called the border radius. So now you can see we've got kind of this interesting little shape on these. There are ways to add drop shadows, and there are ways to do a lot of kind of fun things with this. This is using a specific number of pixels, kind of points on the page. You can also use percentages. And percentages are kind of a good thing to know about, because as you're developing responsive web pages, when your page changes sizes, of course, you've noticed that things move from one place to another, and they also may change size. And one of the things that you can say is I want this to be 25% of the block that I'm working with right now. It doesn't matter what size this is in the page, doesn't matter whether it's on a tablet or a phone. I always want it to take up 25%. So we can round this to be 25% and see what that looks like, or actually 50% might be more interesting. Okay. So now you see that it's got kind of a nice round thing, and that's interesting, and it will change, but it's always going to be 25% of the shape. And if we'd done it with just pixels, as these things change, it wouldn't quite keep the same shape. So percentages are kind of fun to work with. Now let's suppose we actually kind of liked this and we wanted it to stay. Okay, the way this rule is made up, it contains the selector that tells us how we got to this particular item, and that's this class, the Invera Gallery item, and it's an image inside that class. And then these are the rules that are applied to that. There are several other rules, and they are working with other aspects of this particular plugin, but the individual items are the things that we're interested in. And the rules appear inside a block, and the blocks use these braces to mark off the blocks for the commands. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to show you how to make this permanent. Oops. Okay. Now, first of all, let me show you what I mean by it isn't permanent. So looks like that now, but if I refresh the page, sometime it will refresh. They go back to looking like they did in the first place. So how do we go about making this permanent? Well, remember we talked about the customizer, and we talked about the fact that it has, sorry about that. Zoom is being weird. It has this area where we can introduce custom CSS. So we're going to go into the customizer. We're going to go into the additional CSS section, and we're going to paste this thing that we just cut from aren't we? Hello. Why is it everything is always slow when you're demoing it? I did this earlier today and it was really quick. There we go. So here's the section. We just pasted in here. Now, do we need all of this stuff? Actually, no, we don't, because the original CSS, this is all from the original CSS. And all we're saying is I want to add just a little snippet. So we don't need any of that stuff, just the stuff that we actually want to add. So I'm going to publish it. I hate it when it's slow. I don't know what's going on. My Wi-Fi is going out to lunch. Does this make sense to people so far, what I'm trying to accomplish here? Yep, there you go. It has been applied, and now it's permanent, and now everybody will see it. So, cool. So what other kinds of things are useful to do that are just like little kinds of snippet things that you might want to take care of, but you can't? One of the things that drives me crazy about free themes versus paid versions of themes is, hands down, they almost always put their name in the footer and don't let you get rid of it through the customizer. And that just drives me mad. I know they want to make money, and I don't mind paying for themes when the theme gives me a lot of stuff that I really need. But if the only thing that I need is I want that name to go away, that I'm kind of not down with. So can we get rid of it? Yes, we can. Let's find that. And actually, this theme builder has done a nice thing. He has put this into an item, and he didn't have to, but he did. So that was actually nice of him. And this item is, it's a span, and that's just, it's like a div, but it's for a thing that's embedded inside, what am I trying to say? A div is a block that kind of you put stuff inside. A span is when you need a block that's right in the middle of some text that you're using. So that's what you use a span for. So anyway, we've got this span, and the problem, so this would be fine. I can get rid of this now, and I can use something called display. I give it display none on the element, and boom, it's gone. But I'm not actually finding something that I can just cut and paste. So we're going to have to build this ourselves. And all we really need to know is how do we identify the block that we're working with. And we can do that by specifying its class, which is footer info right. And that's really all that we need to know. So if we come back over here to the customizer, we're going to add another rule. And it is for the class footer info right. And the customizer has added my closing tag, my closing brace, which is nice. And then I'm just going to add the same information that we had before. Just display none. There are several different options for display. Display block and display inline. I'm not going to really talk about that. Display none turns out to be super, super useful because there's just lots of times when you're working with something, working with a plugin or something, and it's got everything that you want, except it's got this extra thing that you really don't want to see. Display none, terribly useful. So we've got that taken care of. Close this up. And we reload the page. And our footer should look like what we want it to look like. And indeed it does. Okay. So this is just a kind of a couple of things that you could do really easily to make changes to the look and feel of your website. I wasn't planning on talking for a real long time. So anybody have any questions or anything you'd like to see me look at with the inspector?
I think Alan has a question on the chat box. He asked about how to make all the pictures have a different size because like he has a lot of pictures across the website and they have different size. And he say in some of his post grid, the column get all uneven because his pictures are on different sizes.
That's right. She was saying you make them all the same size when you put them in, but they're already all over the website. And like you have your block there that's got pictures and they're not all the same size. Is there a way to
make them exactly the same size? Usually when I'm working with something like that, I'm going to get a gallery plugin because it's got a whole lot of that kinds of information. It's got a whole lot of that stuff kind of built in. I could do something to specify a very specific size. The problem with doing something like that is that it's going to distort the image. So what you need to do is a little bit more sophisticated than that. And I would look for somebody who's done it instead of trying to do this with CSS myself. I've worked through that problem. It's a little harder than it seems like it should be. So take a look at some gallery plugins. There are lots of good ones out there. I use Envira a lot because there's a free version and it does a really nice mosaic layout on the fly. I actually did a talk just a little while ago. I'll see if I can find some notes on that where I talked about different gallery plugins and things that you can use. I do agree that is a tricky problem, and there's several different ways of solving that problem and making things look right. Usually you're going to wind up with a plugin that you specify do cropping for me. And so it's going to crop for you and take, the center of the picture and make it be the same size as all of them. And that works well if you've got pictures where the important piece of information is in the center of the photo. it does not necessarily work quite so well with all pictures in general. So you have to be selective about how you work them. Another approach to that problem is, instead of trying to make them all line up and be exactly the same size, you use something like a Mosaic Grid layout, where it's a packing algorithm, and it puts the pictures in, and it resizes them so that some are made smaller and some are made larger, but they retain their aspect ratio. If you want to hold on a second, let me see. I have an example of one of those on a page. Okay, yeah, this is an example of a mosaic layout. And you can see that the pictures are not all the same size at all. But what this gallery has done is it's found a way to pack these images by changing the size of them dynamically on the fly. So it makes kind of a perfect square of pictures. And the way that you put them into the gallery kind of determines their relative size. There's another plugin that I've used that's called, I think, Modula, and it also can do mosaic grids, but you can actually specify the sizing yourself. It gets a little tedious to do that work, but you can make a really nice looking page out of it.
This is for a post grid, where it's like, here's all my blog posts, and here's like a little like 50 word, first 50 words, and who wrote it and the date, and read more clip. And so that's where the photos that are the featured photos of all of those blog posts are sometimes making it, depending on, so that they all mess up.
My experience with that is you're better off if you start out by picking things that have all the same aspect ratio. The post layout will actually adjust for the size of the pictures, but it will not change the aspect ratio. It's not going to do clipping for you, generally speaking. Although you might find there are themes that do different things. The thing that you want to look for is cropping or not cropping. That would be the setting that you would be looking for.
Okay, I'll go look for that.
Okay. Yeah, that can be infuriating. I was running a post, a group and people other than myself are creating content, which was great, awesome. But they all had different ideas of what they wanted the pictures to look like. And really in a post grid environment like that, what you really want is landscape mode. So if you can just get people to send you pictures that are landscape and not portrait, you'll be in pretty good shape.
Okay, this is actually a group post where I've got 8 writers, and that's exactly the problem. So that's a great tip. I'll try to get them to all send me landscape stuff.
Okay, cool. Well, I think I'm gonna stop sharing for now. Unless, are there other questions that people would like me to?
Jamie, do you have another question from Michael? He asked, can you recommend a video or text that can serve as a HTML and a CSS primer?
Hold on a sec. Here we go. Well, there are a lot of things out there, and I kind of like the O'Reilly books if you like reading books. I think they have some. The missing manual books, like the Missing Manual for HTML, the Missing Manual for CSS, I've thought were pretty good as primers. Also, just Googling things and watching videos, sometimes that can be a little tedious watching videos, but
Yeah.
for me, it depends on what I'm trying to learn. If I'm trying to learn something that has a really visual component, like when I'm trying to learn a new page builder, that's like the first thing I do is go and Google it and try and find a video. And then I watch the video, then I try and use the thing, and then I watch the video again. And that usually works pretty well for me. So, yeah, I guess that would be my advice.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
If you like books, O'Reilly it almost always has something good.
Thank you.
And
Oh, and Ken mentions the w3schools.com CSS.
Mhm.
That is awesome. That is
It-
really awesome. In fact, I
it's-
actually have that up in another window because we were gonna maybe get to that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's got a lot of good information for syntax and a lot of examples for how to use different elements in CSS. So
Yeah, it's like everything that you can think of in terms of CSS is going to be documented here, and they have like really nice examples and stuff. And then you can go and play with it. And really taking your website and going into the inspector and just kind of typing stuff in that window and seeing what it does is an awesome way to learn immediately how things are going to be affected.
Yep.
It's just a playground sandbox. And it doesn't, it's not going to hurt your website at all. It's only a conversation between you and the browser.
Yep.
A couple of us wanted to know, again, could you show how you open up the inspector?
Oh,
again?
right, yes. So it's right click on a PC and then inspect. It's just in the window someplace. And on a Mac, that's Control, is it? Yeah. Yeah, Control, which is the right click for a Mac.
And that should work in both Chrome and Firefox.
Right. It also works in Safari, and I think it works in Edge as well.
I haven't tried playing with Edge in a while, but I think you're right.
I think Edge these days is based on a lot of the same code as Chrome.
Yeah, I seem to remember that it's built on Chromium, so yeah, it should have the same functionality.
Right. Cool.
And I have a question for myself. So like I'm looking for a review plugin. And do you have any recommendation for me? Like a plugin to for customer to review our service. And at first I want to build a page, but then I realized WordPress have some free plugin. I found some that called like easy testimonial, and another one is called WordPress Google review plugin. But they have very good reviews and some really bad reviews. So I don't know which one to choose.
I haven't used either of those two. What I like to do with reviews is I always read one of the top good reviews just to see what they're having to say. Mm-hmm. And I try and find one that seems like it's from an actual person rather than, the plugin developers' friends. Mm-hmm. And then I read the bottom ones, the 1-star reviews to see. And oftentimes what you'll find with the 1-star reviews is some guy who's unhappy because he couldn't figure out how the plugin worked. And those I completely discount. But sometimes you find something really useful, like this plugin doesn't work with these themes or something.
Right.
And that's really important stuff. That's kind of my general advice on using reviews.
I see, thank you.
Sure.
This is another general question. How how do you identify plugin incompatibilities, and what types of plugins are likely to be a problem?
Ooh.
What plugins are going to be a problem, because without reading the code, you don't know what all they're bringing in. But having said that, usually when I'm in a situation where I think I've got a plugin incompatibility, I set up a sandbox of the website, which is a complete copy, and then I disable all of the plugins. I go with an absolutely vanilla theme, like one from Automatic, like 2017 or whatever.
Right.
And then I bring them in one at a time until I find that there's a problem, and I kind of go from there and sort of eliminate it until I get, the two that are interfering with one another.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's really helpful to look in the JavaScript console, which is also down there in that inspector window.
Because you can see errors that point to where, what it might be breaking on.
Yeah. So if you bring up the console and something goes wrong, you would see some messages in here, and that can be, really useful. Oh, like that.
Yep.
Wow, there's an actual error on that page.
Wow.
Come on, console.
There's a lot of errors on that page.
Well, most of this stuff is saying that things are slow.
Right.
And you get that a lot, but the reds are actually something that you might want to take a look at and see what's going on. Wow. You know what a whole bunch of this stuff is? This site, like many sites, the way in which they amateurize themselves is to have ads in the background. And it's not the site itself, but it's actually the ads that are killing it.
What site is this?
I was looking at the w3schools.com website, the CSS dictionary, basically.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing, I knew there was one other thing I wanted to mention. When you're developing a website and you're working with the CSS and stuff, you need to kind of figure out what you can use. Not all browsers support all CSS, and older versions of browsers don't necessarily support newer kinds of CSS. There's an excellent website called Can I Use? And if you're working, if you find that you've introduced some CSS that isn't quite working on every platform, you can come here and find out if the tools that you're using, the particular CSS commands that you're using, are actually available in all the browsers that people are working with. Now, I can tell you a whole lot of stuff doesn't work on Internet 6, 7, 8, and 9. That's just the way it is. Internet Explorer is everybody's least favorite, least compatible browser.
Yep.
But
it's gotten better than it used to be.
Yeah, well, Edge is better than the rest of them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say that it's because Microsoft didn't build it, but okay. My bias is showing.
Yeah, no, I use Windows, but I don't disagree with you.
So yeah, caniuse.com, very useful in terms of figuring out what parts of CSS that you can use. Oh, and another really useful thing if you're trying to learn some CSS is CSS Tricks. It's a website that just basically has a whole bunch of snippets that you can come and take a look at and see how people did various different things. And that's just super useful. Articles and videos, and about half of the time when I'm Googling for something to try and figure out why a piece of CSS didn't work or how I'm going to do a particular effect or something, I wind up on CSS Tricks. So another website of use. CSS is really fun. It can be daunting. And I know that it took me probably several years before I got to the point where I understood specificity. And even now it still kind of bites me.
Yeah, every once in a while you run into a problem where Why isn't this working?
Why did this not do what I expected it to? And the inspector is terribly, terribly helpful in figuring out that stuff, because it will show you exactly which things are applied to which styling techniques are applied to the particular element that you're looking at. And you can see things that are crossed out and you're like, why is that crossed out? Why is that not working? Oh,
Yeah.
further on up, I see this thing, and
It's been overridden by that.
been overwritten by this plugin, for example. Right. Okay. Well, I'm going to say I'm going to call this presentation as being over, but we can hang out and see if people have questions about things. And see what y'all want to talk about.
I can add a couple things here real quick, like.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, at the introductions, there was a question about SEO, but he was on the WordPress.com environment. I'm mostly on .org, but I do have some clients and associates that are on .com. So I did a quick search, and WordPress.com has a lot of SEO built into their dashboard. So I went to the repository and I found an article which I post kind of at the beginning of the chat, but there's a bunch of articles. So if you do SEO, WordPress.com, you're going to find a bunch of articles about how to employ SEO on that environment. And there's a lot of stuff there. I'm on .org. I'm helping some people with .com, but I'm not. The SEO, I'd have to dig in quite a bit, but there's every indication there's a lot of power there. And so those tools are there. You just haven't quite figured out how to use them yet. And then another gentleman asked about tax compliance in multiple jurisdictions. Now, I've been on a couple of WordPress meetups dealing with tax, and there's like TaxJar and TaxCloud, and I think it's TaxCloud, TaxWays or TaxCloud, one of those. This is something that's been put together by the treasurers of multiple states for compliance for online e-commerce. And most of the jurisdictions, you're tax-free under 100,000, and some of them it's $500,000 revenue, because they're not trying to hammer the little guys, but then they don't want the big guys doing a bunch of revenue. They have tools that are free to help you comply that are plugins for your website. So TaxWays, I think, is the name, and I put a link to it up above. I'm just not quite recalling that.
TaxCloud is the one you posted. So
I think it's TaxCloud. I'm pretty sure it's TaxCloud is the one.
Okay.
And I didn't dig into the site because I haven't spent a lot of time with that. A tax professional did a WordPress meetup in a Seattle WordPress meetup about a month and a half ago, and that's where I picked that up. I'm not a tax expert. I'm not saying it works for you, but this is a resource that might be beneficial. And it's free, where a lot of the other ones, the name ones, they charge a per, they're probably worth it, but it's not free. So there you go.
Right. Well, cool. Thank you. That is a really useful resource. I appreciate it. Do you know off the top of your head if any of these have like WordPress plugins that talk to them already, or is this something that you would have to get somebody to build to talk to their API?
No, they do have plugins available for tax compliance through your website. Will automatically enter it. I'm working a lot with WooCommerce, but I haven't really looked at the tax compliance modules. There's like 6,000 WooCommerce plugins, but there are dedicated tax compliance stuff, and there are plugins available to assist with that. I can't tell you which ones are good, and I'm sure mileage varies. There's probably some good ones, there's some bad ones, and depending on your application. I recommend this this TaxCloud because it has the states are involved, and they've put a bunch of money to help develop the tools because they want compliance, right?
Yeah.
They're not trying to make money off of the software. They're just very thankful if you will just report your income, right?
Yeah.
And so I was looking at some very expensive packages for some other clients, and it's all relative to a budget, right? Expensive. And I came across this Cloudways in a seminar, and it's all free. So
Cool.
Right. This particular tax challenge involves the nature of certain customer relationship management tools that are able to project what they would often call a purchase page onto a variety of places. So the trick there is to bring in from a tax table the current rules of that particular state's taxation, so that you don't have to send somebody back to the site that's actually housing the WooCommerce or some type of shopping cart. So you're basically trying to save a step of moving the customer, from whoever they're at right now back to the WooCommerce, shopping page or something like that. So it's a little bit esoteric, but there's reasons to do it.
So I'm not quite sure if I understand the projecting. Is this some sort of affiliate marketing type application?
No, not at all. It's just think about it. You see something on Facebook, and if you want to make a purchase within that Facebook page, that requires, one set of techniques versus clicking on a link in that Facebook page that then brings you to a shopping page.
You're actually
So
purchasing from Facebook?
What's that?
So you're actually doing purchasing from the Facebook
Yeah,
page?
you can literally do purchases almost on any page if you have the right tools enabled.
Interesting.
But most people don't care. I mean, they don't care if it's 1 or 2 clicks to
Right.
get your potential customer back to the shopping cart. So, it's a subtlety. Most people don't care. But, I'm trying to solve for a particular set of circumstances.
Sure.
I have a WooCommerce question too. So I have WooCommerce. It's supposed to go to Stripe, that I have the plugin installed as well. And it's for people to buy physical copies of our music. Nobody buys physical copies of CDs anymore. They all do digital, right? But I actually, after months, had someone try to use that to buy a physical CD. And so I just discovered that it isn't working. And so the behavior is that the person can go to the album, they can click on the product, which is all set up, and it says, you've just added this album to your cart. Do you want to look at your cart? There's like see cart. If you click on see cart, it knocks it back to the front page of my website. It doesn't go to a cart. And I went in from the inside into WooCommerce to look at like the list of orders, and the order isn't there. So it's not functioning. But when I set this up back in July, so really since July till November, no one tried to buy an actual physical copy of the CD. They all want digital downloads. But in July, I did the thing where when you set up your WooCommerce, they give you a special number where you can pretend to use your credit card, but it won't really send the thing through. And I tested it, and that order's in there as an unfulfilled order because it wasn't a real order. So it was working then. So what broke?
The first thing I would check is there's a listing of pages that get created for your cart when you install WooCommerce.
Okay.
And the view cart button should go to a cart page. And if that page does not exist, it would bounce you back to the home page. And that wouldn't necessarily keep your cart from functioning, but it will keep them from being able to see it.
Right, exactly. So how do I make sure I have a cart page? I just look at my pages to make sure there is one?
Well, the first place I would go is to the WooCommerce settings. And let me pull up a page where I can look at that.
There's a page that maps out what all of the various parts of WooCommerce map to in terms of pages, and the cart is one of them.
And how do I get to the map?
Go to WooCommerce, then go to settings.
Okay.
And I'm still getting there myself, so.
Okay. Well, that's cool that you knew what that behavior probably means.
Well, I've seen something like that before, so I have a lot of e-commerce customers on Woo, so I know it fairly well.
Okay, cool. So I go to WooCommerce, I go to WooCommerce's settings.
I'm trying to remember where they've got that layout.
Or I'm going to go over to my site and go on my dashboard and look at this too. WooCommerce settings. Yeah, I don't see any place in settings that makes sense really for that.
Trying to remember if I have I know I have some test sites that have WooCommerce installed, but I'm not sure I remember what they are.
And the settings for that are not where I remember them being, so they've moved it.
Okay, I can't get that one set without being.
I think I've got just the free version of WooCommerce.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. In the settings, go all the way over to the right to advanced, the very far right tab.
Okay. Advanced, got it.
And there should be a page setup listing there.
Uh-huh.
And there should be a cart page, checkout page, account page.
Oh, I didn't do this.
And you need to make sure you have something selected for each one of those, or the shopping cart doesn't know where to point people.
Okay. All right, so cart page is giving me a bunch of the pages that I own already that exist, but
Yeah, you probably just want to create an empty page that's named cart and then map it to that.
Or check and see if you have one, because yeah, it should be just pointed to a blank page named cart by default. And you know, if for some reason that didn't happen, then that would explain the behavior you're seeing.
okay, all right. I can work on this. Thanks. Now I know where to work on it. Thank you.
Cool.
I'll throw something out there. On Wednesdays at noon Pacific time, there's a guy from WooCommerce who runs Woo Wednesdays. And he's actually works for Automatic for WooCommerce. And he's got supports 60, 70 meetups around the globe, really, but mostly the US. But this one he runs himself. So if you ever end up with a real problem, and it sounds like Kenneth is on it, so he's probably your better resource if he's local there. But you can always just drop into this free WordPress meetup and throw your, if you got something that's really, and ask a WooCommerce employee directly. Now it's been a 2-hour meetup for the last year. I think at the first year where it's just going to be one, but they'll run over. But it's called Woo Wednesdays. It's on meetup.com. I'll pump the link in. It's a resource available to you, but I can tell Kenneth here, he's on it, man.
But so again, that's a meetup called what?
Woo Wednesdays, and I will go
Woo
get
Wednesdays.
drop in the chat.
Okay.
Sometimes it's hard to get to these companies like WooCommerce, but he's the community he's the only employee who's hired he only works for WooCommerce. He will not contract out. I've known him for a little while now, so he's a longtime WordPress developer. They hired him, and his whole job is to work with the community, promote WooCommerce, and help solve. And if he can't answer the answer, he's got a beeline straight into Automatic and the Woo guys, and he'll put a ticket in for you. But I've only seen him stumped once or twice, and he's pretty good. Lance has been joining me with him, and I think he'd agree that he's a pretty good resource.
Yeah, I was just gonna pop on real quick to say that I second everything you're saying. I mean, you've got a guy that's pretty much on the inside who'll pretty much answer any question you want.
Yeah.
So if he doesn't know, he'll go to the guy that's writing it. So yeah, absolutely. It's worth it. I don't regret a minute that I spent in that meetup.
It's one of the better ones.
WooCommerce Wednesday.
Woo Wednesdays. I got the link here. I'll just drop it in the chat for you. He's trying to gear it towards beginners. He's trying to stay away from the developer too much. He doesn't want to be too, he's trying to get new people to understand that this platform's there. But you know, there's some pretty sophisticated developers. There's a couple of guys in there that run a bunch of Woo sites. And as Lance was saying, it's a pretty good meetup. If you're in the WooCommerce WordPress environment and you're doing e-commerce, it seems to be it's been worth our time, Lance and my time anyway. So anyway, I dropped her in there, and
Cool.
it sounds like Aileen, that you probably know where your solution to that problem is. So I hear Stripe works pretty good. I've been using Square, and Square's been working pretty well, but I haven't had some recent problems with Square and Woo. But for the most part, that's been working pretty good for my clients. I haven't used Stripe yet, but the Woo guy recommends it. And then another guy out of Dallas has got like 20 Woo sites. He really likes Stripe too. So,
Yeah, I've used Stripe on a couple of websites and it works really well. It
Yeah.
function with Woo.
so
I've actually used it with the events calendar plugin and for selling tickets to conferences and stuff.
yeah, I think in the next setup, I'm probably going to give Stripe a try because I've been just hearing a lot of good stuff about it. Square works really good in the field.
I've heard that as well.
But the Woo web WordPress, I don't know, it's working for us, but you know, a couple of minor problems. Not the end of the world.
Well, do we have any more questions at this point? Actually getting pretty close to 8, and my battery is down to 10%. So I might be dropping off.
Well, I don't have anything. Thank you for hosting. I appreciate the input from you and others. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for letting me drop in. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, everyone.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thanks
y'all
a
for showing
lot.
up.
I got
Thank
some
you.
good answers. Appreciate
Good.
it.
Great.
Good luck.
Come back.
Bye.